Dear people watching and listening, Assalamu alaikum. Kindly like and share this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please support my channel by contributing to my Patreon account so that I can continue making the audiobook series. Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, Volume 3, The Battle of Hattin, The Conquest of Jerusalem, and the Third Crusade. Start of Part 4 of Chapter 1. Reactions to the Battle of Hattin. Al-Qadi al-Fadil's joy at the victory at Hattin. Al-Qadi al-Fadil was absent from the victory of Hattin. He was in Damascus, and when the news reached him, he wrote to the Sultan saying, "Congratulations to His Highness, for Allah has supported the true religion through him. As the saying goes, you have become my master and the master of every Muslim. By means of him, the true religion has become established. Two types of blessing, visible and invisible, have been bestowed upon him, and he has gained two types of kingdom, in this world and in the hereafter. Your servant is writing this letter when heads have not yet been raised from prostration, and tears have not yet been wiped from cheeks. Every time your servant thinks of these churches being turned back into mosques, and that in the places in which it was said that Allah is the third of three, it is now being said that He is one. He renews his thanks to Allah, sometimes verbally, and sometimes by the flow of tears from his eyes." An amazing dream. The mother of the Sultan Salahuddin used to say that she had a dream whilst she was pregnant with the Sultan, that someone came to her and said, "In your womb there is one of the swords of Allah." Conquests on the coast before the conquest of Jerusalem. After Allah blessed Salahuddin al-Ayyubi with the great victory over the Crusaders in the glorious Battle of Hattin, which was like the key to the Muslim conquests in the region, he wanted to crown his great efforts by liberating the holy city and expelling the Crusaders from it, but he did not head towards Jerusalem straight away. Rather, he chose to head towards the coast in order to conquer the Crusader cities, fortresses and citadels that were scattered throughout the region. This was for several reasons. 1. Attacking the holy city straight away would lead to the mobilization of all Crusader armies in the region, who would gather together to fight him, thus making things difficult for him and delaying the liberation of Jerusalem. 2. Conquest of the city by Salahuddin would create a great deal of anxiety in the Western world, which could lead to it rushing in with all its forces to fight him. 3. He was aware of the strength of the fortifications that the Crusaders had put around the city, inside and outside the walls. 4. By heading towards the coastal cities, he wanted to deprive the Crusaders of their naval bases, which connected them to the outside world, especially Western Europe, so that they would become besieged inside Greater Syria. And 5. He also wanted to facilitate rapid communication by sea between the seaports on the Egyptian coast and the ports along the Greater Syrian coast. For all of these reasons, Salahuddin headed towards the Crusader sites scattered along the coast. This was part of his plan that was aimed at weakening their forces and preventing reinforcements from Europe reaching them. On Sunday, 25th Rabiul Thani, 583 Hijri, that is 5th July 1187 Common Era, Salahuddin besieged Tiberias. He captured its citadel and stayed there until the following Tuesday, putting its affairs in order. when he appointed Sarim ad-Din Qaimaz an-Najmi as its governor. On Wednesday, 8 July 1187 Common Era, Salah ad-Din set out towards Acre. As soon as he reached it, its people came out to him, beseeching him for safety, so he granted them the safety of their lives and their property, and gave them the choice between staying or leaving. They chose to leave. The Ayyubid army entered Tiberias on a Friday in Jumadil Awwal, 583 Hijri. He seized the property and stores that were in the city, and released the Muslim captives who were being held there, of whom there were 4,000, without causing any harm to the local people or the Venetian and Pisano traders. This tolerant policy that was followed by Salah ad-Din was very useful, and made it easier for him to accomplish his mission of conquering the coastal cities without any great resistance, as a result of what had happened at Acre. His policy also allowed economic life to continue in that city, once the Western merchants experienced his justice and tolerance. Salah ad-Din stayed in the city of Acre for some time, as he used it as a center for his army during the conquest of nearby fortresses, such as Nasirah, Caesarea, Haifa, Sephoria, Shaqif, Fulah, Tur, and other neighboring cities. Then he captured the city of Nablus, where he granted security to the people of the city, and to their wealth and possessions, because they were Muslims who had stayed in the city after the Crusaders captured it. He also conquered Sidon, Beirut, and the region of Jubail. Salah ad-Din wanted to conquer the city of Tyre after the conquest of Jerusalem, but he decided to head towards Ascalon because it was easier, and because it was located at the crossroads between Syria and Egypt. On his way to Ascalon, he captured Ramlah, the fortress of Toron, Bethlehem, and Hebron. Ascalon surrendered to him in Rajab 583 Hijri, that is September 1187 Common Era. He also conquered the cities of Gaza, Tarum, Arsuf, Natrun, and Beit Jibril. Al-Adil, the brother of Salah ad-Din, marched from Egypt and captured Jaffa. Thus the cities and fortresses of the interior fell, apart from Crac de Montreal and Kerak, which continued to resist, and thus the entire coast came under the control of Salah ad-Din, from Beirut to Jaffa, apart from the city of Tyre, which was controlled by the Marquis Conrad de Montferrat at that time. He was very strong, smart, and wealthy. He began to fortify the city and redug the moat in preparation for a confrontation with Salah ad-Din, especially since the Crusader troops, who had departed from the coastal cities, had all gathered in the city of Tyre, after Salah ad-Din gave them the freedom to choose between going to Jerusalem or the city of Tyre, and most of them went to Tyre. Consequences of the Battle of Hattin. A decisive battle. The Battle of Hattin is described as a decisive battle because we see that it changed the map of political entities in the region. Immediately after this battle, the Mujahid Sultan headed towards the cities of the great Assyrian coast, which he conquered. They all fell one after another with the exception of Tyre, which was strongly fortified. Thus the problem of coastal Syria, from which the Muslims had been expelled many years earlier, was solved. The Muslims were no longer to be kept inland. The cities of Acre, Jaffa, Sidon, Beirut, Jubail, Ascalon, and others fell. In fact, anyone who studies the historical sources from this period will be astonished by the wave of Crusader cities that fell in an unprecedented manner, which reflected the overwhelming military superiority of the Muslims against their enemies. The Crusader citadels, which for so long had raided Muslim areas, sometimes turning the lives of local inhabitants into a living hell, also fell. Among the citadels that fell to the Ayyubid army's operations we may mention Tiberias, Safed, Hunin, Toron, Bagras, Tarabsak, Hajar Shaglan, Qasir, and many others. After that came the Muslim conquest of Jerusalem, the capital of the Crusader entity. The beginning of the end for the Crusader presence. The Battle of Hattin was more than just a military disaster that befell the Crusaders. In reality, it carried the promise that the Muslims would succeed in destroying the greatest colonialist movement the world ever witnessed during the Middle Ages. It also represented the point at which the Crusader tide began to recede from the Muslim Near East, and spelled the beginning of the end for the Crusader presence. This battle put an end to 90 years of decline and division in the Muslim regions of the Near East. It confirmed the importance of unity among the areas of this geographical region, comprising Southwest Asia and Egypt, in confronting all dangers. Hattin established a new beginning for the balance of power, and confirmed that the Frankish forces could be defeated. Modern historical studies of the details of this era have shown that the Battle of Hattin ended in victory for Salah ad-Din, but it did not completely uproot the Frankish presence. Strategically, it was a decisive battle that separated two stages. It ended the stage of retreat and defeat, and established a stage of victory and progress, paving the way for the long and difficult struggle that witnessed a great many advances and setbacks, attacks and counterattacks, until the Frankish positions were finally undermined and their kingdoms dismantled, and they were expelled from the region. Rise in Salah ad-Din's status. One of the names of Allah is Ar-Rafi, which means the one who raises. The Battle of Hattin was one of the causes by means of which Allah raised Salah ad-Din in status. Thus he joined the ranks of the senior Muslim Mujahideen, leaders and rulers, as he restored the Muslim self-confidence and the dignity that they had lost after the death of Nur ad-Din Mahmud. This victory had a far-reaching impact on the Muslims in general, and the people of Damascus in particular, because Damascus at that time was the center of his operations and the seat of his power. His judges and scribes were there, who throughout the battle were prostrating to Allah and praying to Him for victory against his enemies. When they learned of the victory, they expressed their joy with tears and moving words of thanks and praise to Allah. The Battle of Hattin, the key to Jerusalem. The Battle of Hattin was a battle of liberation for Palestine, because it is what paved the way to victory in Jerusalem and the rest of Palestine. Ibn Wasil described this battle by stating, "The Battle of Hattin was the key to the Muslim conquests, through which the conquest of Jerusalem became possible." It is regarded as a link between the achievements of Nur ad-Din Mahmud and Ruknuddin by Bars al-Bunduqtari. Since the Franks had come to the Syrian coast and taken over Greater Syria, the Muslims had never seen a day like that of Hattin. May Allah have mercy on Malik al-Nasir and sanctify his soul, for after the companions of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may Allah be pleased with them, Islam has never since been supported with a man like him or Nur ad-Din Mahmud ibn Zangi. May Allah have mercy on them both. They renewed Islam after it had been in decline. They built Tawheed up after it had been knocked down. Then after they were gone, Allah supported Islam by means of Al-Malik al-Muzaffar Ruknuddin by birth, whose story is even more amazing because he came after the Tatars had taken over most of the Muslim world, and the people had lost hope of any chance that the Ummah would be revived. He defeated the Tatars and saved the Muslim world, and regained most of the coastal fortresses from the Franks. Importance of geographic awareness. This battle highlighted the importance of being fully aware of the advantages of the geographical location of the Muslim East, and benefiting from those advantages, so that they could become an active factor in the Ummah's strength. One of the conclusions of this battle was the emergence of the importance of Egypt as a source of human and material resources that was of great importance in connecting the Muslim lands in the Near East. It also highlighted the importance of Palestine, which was regarded as a bridge or crossroads between Syria and Egypt. Respect and admiration for Salah ad-Din. After this victory, the name of Salah ad-Din began to strike fear into the hearts of the Crusaders, fear that was mixed with admiration, because the conquests were characterized by nobility, chivalry, and decency. His tolerant and kind treatment of their prisoners had a great impact in causing a number of cities and fortresses to surrender, without putting up any resistance worth mentioning. In fact, he demonstrated immense mercy and chivalry in his dealings with the Crusaders. By virtue of these characteristics, his armies exercised self-control in victory and avoided committing the kind of bestial acts that were prevalent during that era. In a discussion of the chivalry of Salah ad-Din towards the wives and daughters of the Crusaders, Arnold wrote, "He was very generous towards them, to such an extent that they praised God, and when they left, they spoke a great deal of the compassion and respect with which Salah ad-Din had treated them. He honored Ashiva, the wife of Raymond III, and allowed her to leave the citadel of Tiberias safely. She left with her property and her retinue, men and women, and went to Tripoli, where Balian of Ibelin was among the princes who had escaped, but whose wife and children were in Jerusalem. Salah ad-Din allowed him to go to the city to bring his wife and children out, but he stipulated that he should not stay there for more than one night. Western Europe, especially France, showed a great deal of admiration and praise for Salah ad-Din, to such an extent that in European literary works he became a legendary figure beyond the framework of objective historical reality. The defeat of the Crusaders at Hattin caused a loss of dignity to the Kingdom of Jerusalem, especially after the capture of its king, Guy de Lusignan. As a result of this battle, there was a tangible decrease in the number of fighting knights, as most of the Crusader knights and most of the army of Jerusalem fell in this battle, either slain or captured. Those who saw the slain said that there were no prisoners, and those who saw the prisoners said that there were no slain. Cumulative efforts that preceded Salah ad-Din. The victories of Salah ad-Din did not come out of the blue, and his military achievements were not attained without prior efforts on the political, military, organizational, and administrative fronts. Reform and revival efforts had gone on for more than a century, until the time came to reap their harvest at the time of Imad ad-Din Zangi and Nur ad-Din Zangi. The latter is regarded as the true founder of the major changes that were seen in Syria and then Egypt. Nur ad-Din Mahmud was known for his military victories, his reforms and his achievements in propagating Islam. He was famous for building schools and educational establishments. He paid attention to the judiciary and building mosques and fortresses. He spread knowledge in Aleppo and Damascus and other cities of Syria. During his era, the judiciary regained its legitimate historical role. He built a courthouse and encouraged the scholars and fuqaha to play their role in the psychological preparation of the troops, conveying the message and teaching the basics of Arabic language, fiqh, and hadith to the commanders of his army. In this academic atmosphere, Salah ad-Din received his religious education. He studied under the scholar of hadith Ahmad ibn Muhammad al-Isfahani, the preacher Ali ibn Ibrahim ibn Najah, and Najmuddin al-Habushani. These were some of the scholars who supervised the education of the third generation of political and military leaders who had the honor of inflicting defeat on the Frankish forces after 100 years of on-again, off-again confrontation. Salah ad-Din did not do this by himself. Rather, Allah guided him. Moreover, this was the historical objective and outcome of advancement, which had begun with the religious reform movement that had been led by Nizamul Mulk at the time of the Seljuks, the prominent figures of which included Imam al-Jawaini, Abu Ishaq al-Shirazi, al-Ghazali, and others. These efforts bore fruit, the most important of which included the Battle of Hattin and the conquest of Jerusalem at the hands of Salah ad-Din. End of Part 4 of Chapter 1. End of Chapter 1.